huge anticipation around when and how we will get COVID-19 vaccines, and if the vaccines that we have will be able to be used against the new variant, the dominant variant of COVID-19. At the same time, there is a debate around if or when or how someone could be told they have to be vaccinated, or to put it another way, if you or I would have to be vaccinated. You can imagine all of the arguments, so I would like to think that I have a right to say it's my body, I'll decide what happens to it, thanks very much. I could also imagine a situation where, for example, if a large group of people refuse to get vaccinated, they put everyone at risk. And it's because of some people refusing to allow their children to get vaccinated that other children in the United States got seriously ill from measles, a disease which really we shouldn't be having pandemics of right now. Well, the constitutional law professor at UCT, Professor Pierre de Vos, joins us. He's got a view on this. Prof, good afternoon to you. Thanks for your time. I'd like to start here. I would imagine for a government to say, Stephen, you have to undergo a medical procedure, they have to bring a pretty strong argument.
Yes, because the Constitution protects the right to bodily integrity, which includes the right to make choices about your body, not only about contraception, but other parts of your body. And so if you're going to either directly, which is obviously out of the question, or indirectly force people to get the vaccine by saying you cannot do this, you cannot go on a plane, you cannot serve the public at the spa if you don't have a vaccination certificate, then it will be justified if the interest of the government outweighs or trumps this individual interest. And when will it outweigh it? Well, when the lives of other people are being threatened. We know this already in slightly different contexts where the courts have said that if you are, for religious reasons, you don't want your child to have a blood transfusion, they will order that the child get the blood transfusion because the life of the child trumps the freedom of religion rights of the parents. So it will be that kind of thing. So if you can show that the vaccine is going to protect many people, that will probably trump the right that you have to bodily integrity, as long as that right is only infringed as little as is required to achieve the purpose.
I mean, I suppose this is a silly example, but I have to use it. I mean, in terms of morality, whenever you watch an American movie and there's someone with a bomb and he's going to kill 100 people and some police officer takes that guy out, we applaud because we know that morally to save 100 people is better than saving the one.
Yes, except of course the example is not good because you're not actually going to kill the person, you're going to give them a mild shock with something that is going to make it uncomfortable for them for a day or two. So the infringement is actually not, it's significant, but it is not dramatic. And the purpose is actually overwhelmingly important. Of course, whether these kind of rules are, in terms of policy, the best way to get people to vaccinate, I don't know. It's not my area of expertise, but constitutionally, I think it's easy to justify, and the court will find that it is a justifiable limitation on your rights.
There's also, I mean, it's quite interesting because in some ways the principle's already been accepted. So to enter some countries or to go to some countries and then enter South Africa, you need a yellow fever certificate. You need to prove that you've been vaccinated against yellow fever. So the principle's actually there.
Yes, in fact, the Department of Basic Education also has issued regulations that say if you want to register your child at a school, you have to bring proof that he or she was vaccinated for various things. Although that is not always, I think, enforced, but there is a principle that they're already requiring this. It will just be extended to other kinds of things in the middle of a global pandemic. So if they go that route, it will just extend existing practices in some way, yes.
If it came to a court case, and I suspect that a court case may not actually be the right way to manage all of this. I think convincing people of the efficacy of the vaccine might be better. And a court dispute by its nature is sort of contentious and contested. But I presume government would have to have absolute scientific proof of two things: that the vaccine was safe and that it worked.
Well, they will have to show that the scientific consensus is that it is safe and that it works. Very much, and people will, if they come with other arguments and the science is against them, they will not succeed. An example of this happened in the 2000s, where the government said antiretroviral drugs may be dangerous, they are toxic. We need to test them more. And the court was presented with all the available evidence showing that this is nonsense. And the court accepted the scientific consensus and rejected the government's arguments because that is not where the science was.
It's amazing how often the Navaropine argument has come up again and again in the last little while, hasn't it? I never thought that we'll deal with it again. You referred to a precedent. I mean, I love this case. I mean, it's so interesting, of a person who was accused of a theft and he had a bullet lodged in him. And in the end, a judge ruled that actually this person had to undergo an operation so that the police could, so that a surgeon, not the police, the surgeon could retrieve the bullet and give it to the police.
Yes, I use that example because I say that sometimes, although we have a right to bodily integrity, the courts have sometimes ruled or ordered quite a serious invasion of your bodily integrity if a more important purpose was to be achieved. In this case, there was a shooting, 2 people were killed or shot. This was probably the evidence that was going to nail the person with a bullet in his leg. And so the court ordered this. And they, in the argument, they specifically say you have to balance the interest. And in this case, there's not going to be any permanent damage to the person because taking out a bullet is going to not threaten their life. But the bigger picture of making sure that, that justice is prevailing in terms of the criminal offense therefore trumps this person's individual right to bodily integrity.
It seems to me that there's going to be, and that there already sort of is a conversation around vaccination, how effective it is. I mean, this is despite the fact that virtually every single South African's been vaccinated as a child, but we'll put that to one side for a moment. Part of this argument is not going to be about whether government could force people, but it's about whether there are other, less coercive methods. So there's convincing, and I mean, in some ways this is more of a political process, which is probably a better thing. But the president has said that not people will not be forced to be vaccinated. And he also said that people will not have to prove, if they want to go into a public place, so if they want to walk down a street, that they have to be vaccinated. But a private space is very different. I mean, could you imagine, let's take a cinema, for example. You're all very close for a long time. Could a cinema demand to see your vaccination certificate, a privately owned cinema?
So the requirement in our law, unlike in the US, private institutions are also bound by the Bill of Rights. So they would be able to do this, in my view, but there would have to be some authorizing legislation because you can only limit people's rights in terms of the limitation clause if it is done through legislation. A private company would not be able to just do it out of off the bat because that will be an infringement by them of other people's rights. If it is authorized by law, say the labor law, for example, says that you have, as an employer, you have a duty to protect your employees from illness, then requiring vaccination in the office by a private company might be justified and allowed by the legislation. And if you don't do that, then, well, then you maybe the employer can allow you to work from home. But there are clearly issues here where it might be a good thing for private companies to be allowed to do this, but you would need, as I say, the legislation to justify it.
It seems to me this is probably where the argument's actually going to come, is around employer-employee law, so labour law. And then I can also imagine quite a big fight in Parliament to have that kind of legislation. I mean, if it needs the kind of legislation you say it does, and it must if you say it does, it means that that's actually going to be quite a big fight.
Yes, so the problem is, of course, that the people who are either believe in conspiracy theories about vaccination, or the other people who are genuinely worried about safety because they haven't read all the science. There's a very strong lobby for this. So I think it will be difficult politically to do so. So the best option is, of course, for people to just take the vaccine when it comes. And part of the argument I'm trying to make is really not about the law. It's trying to explain to people that the choice is really your own personal selfish interest or the interest of 60 million people. And if you choose your own interest, you are really just a bit of a, well, I cannot say that on air, but you're not a nice one.
Pierre, I think we can fill in the blanks. Thank you very much indeed. I do appreciate it. Pierre de Vos, thank you, the Professor of Constitutional Law at the University of Cape Town.